and welcome to the live series podcast brought to you by Amicus Recruitment. This is the podcast that gives you insight into the life and role of tech leaders from all over the world. Today, I'm joined by Victor Moreno, Head of Engineering over at the inclusive dating app Her. Thank you so much, Victor, for coming on. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for having me. This is very exciting.
Yeah, I've genuinely been really excited. I know when my colleague Jack introduced us before, I was absolutely psyched when I found out who you were and what you were working on and your background and everything like that, because it's actually what we're going to talk about is a subject that we haven't actually really covered before on the podcast, but it is something that I'm myself is super passionate about, and it's really great to have someone like yourself on to talk about it who is very definitely passionate about this. So for anyone that maybe hasn't heard of Her or yourself, do you maybe just kind of want to like walk me through your career experience up to now and kind of give some context on Her as well?
Yes, of course. So I'm gonna start a bit with myself. So I started, like many of us, in leadership position as a software developer. So I started my career back in Spain in the around 2007 or so. The usual. I was like a nerdy kid. I love machines. I love computers. So that naturally led me to pursue education on that. So I started my career in Spain, went to uni, learned a bunch of things, tried to work out life in Spain. At the time, sadly, the crisis at that time was like very bad for everyone. So I was like a bit forced to move. So I moved to Ireland, where I keep working as a developer, stay in Ireland. Then I moved to the Netherlands, just increasing through the natural path of an individual contributor. In Netherlands, I worked in social media and agency world for a couple of years. And after that, I decided to move to London. Because Netherlands is a great country. It was amazing. The language barrier was a bit of always a thing, but also I had an amazing opportunity to come to work in London in a company that there were at the time 20 people. So I was part of the very initial engineering team. So I spent 4 years at that company as a backend developer, organically as well, get more involvement, keep learning, keep trying things, start to mentor people, start to move towards management. The company went in a growth spur, and then we grew from 20 something when I joined to almost 200 when I left. So I was really involved in those stages as part of the technical, the most core technical member. At some point there, I discovered that working with people actually is as rewarding as working with technology. People processes are my mind are very similar as coding processes. You have like a problem you need to solve, and you have to aim for win-win situation, right? So I pivot my career from like being like a senior engineer, taking a lot of like, oh, let's do this new thing, let's try this technology, to like, oh, I want to work with people, how I support them, how I mentor them, how I guide them through being like a junior till a senior, right? From there, I moved to a company in the travel industry during the last bits of COVID lockdowns, as a head of technology, owning like the whole technology function. And from there, I landed at Her as a head of engineering, where I, as well, we're a startup. I own a lot of the IT and the development as the final technical stakeholder, right? That's the thing. So for who does not know Her, so we are a dating app for queer women. Our mission is to connect every queer women, non-binary, gender folk, trans, questioning women in the world, to help them to find love and connection. So that's us. We have a very hard stance on diversity, inclusion, to generate safe spaces. And the thing that made me move to the company, I would say that's kudos to Robin, to the CEO, because he has a great way of doing things. And I talked with her half an hour. She introduced me to the role of the company, and I was like, oh damn, I really want to work at this company, but not because it's a dating app or because it's technology-wise. It's because the mission is a net positive in the world, it's a safe space, and it's within my own community. And I thought, like, I can put my skills, I put everything I learned to make my community better, even if specifically the women community is not my part of the community, the queer community it is, right? So I feel really inspired to work on this every day. Give me great joy to talk with people randomly like, oh, you work at her. I met my girlfriend, or I met my best friend, or I start to use it. I'm like, oh, great. Tell me what we can do. What do you think is the best, right? It's a very rewarding experience, and we love it. We want to keep doing it, and we are aiming to put something positive and putting some love out there in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I was really excited when I found out about her, and then even more excited when I found out that you worked at her, because it was something that I've come across as well, in my life outside, and it's definitely something that is it's kind of one of those products where you kind of feel like how is this not already around, like, because you've got all these kind of like mainstream like other kind of queer apps as well, for like Grindr, for example, or things like that, but there's never really been a predominant one specifically for queer women. So it's such, I fully agree with you, I think it's such an interesting and really useful product, and it must be great to feel like you are really contributing to your own community like that. I think that sounds really brilliant. So
yeah.
Presumably her has grown a significant amount. I know it feels like it's definitely a brand that I'm seeing a lot more of kind of everywhere, really. But presumably you're kind of in charge of the hiring side of a lot of it. So talk me through kind of how you've been going with hiring, what's the process look like for engineering positions as well?
Yes, so we grow the engineering team. So the engineering team tripled in the last year and a half. So when I joined, and I joined specifically, one part of me joining was like carry on this engineering growth, right? So our engineering hiring process is not utterly complicated. It's not a convoluted process. There is no hoops to jump through. We have a very straightforward process, right? We have several interviews. The first one is with me, that I sit with the candidates and I introduce the company. I do a conversation like to understand who they are. Then it's a technical test when someone of my engineers later join to debrief on the test and talk about the presented solution. And then it's like a couple of rounds to meet the team, right? What is different is like, we do a lot of what I call, or the industry call, like a value alignment during the interviews. And as being an app that we pride ourselves in being a safe space, one of my guiding principles for interviewing is making sure people is walking an interview knowing that this is a safe space. This is like, so it's not an interrogatory. I'm not here to get a gotcha, or you don't know this, or you don't know that, right? It's especially to get to have enough to know them, and for them enough to know us about our culture, how we operate, what our stances in queerness, where we move, right? And try to get the best engineers. And I have like a very common approach to hiring. I really enjoy it. It's tiring. I mean, when you interview like 20 candidates or 30 candidates in a couple of weeks, right? Or in 3 weeks, it's a tiring process, but I really enjoy it. And the thing is like how we make this, making sure it's a safe space, right? Is with this set of behaviors. So I will say that I do not sign on as an openly queer person in my day-to-day life to everyone. I do not hide it. So what I do is I create that safe space by, for example, using my pronouns that today I haven't, but they are he, him, right? I introduce myself like, hi, I'm Victor. My pronouns are he, him, and please use them when you talk about it, right? And this is something like super tiny, right? It's like such a very tiny, but it's a signal starting with that, where you're saying like, in this space, in this conversation you are having with me, it's safe that if you are using they, them, see them, he, him, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can use whatever it is, and I'm gonna respect it. I'm not gonna go and misgender you. I'm not gonna go and ask questions about why you use those, right? I will take them and I will keep using that. And that create a space of a comfortable space to start to present what we believe. I mean, it's not a PR tactic. It's not like oh, look how good are in diversity. It's really how we operate. More things I do. I believe that leadership is all about being useful and supportive, right? So usually my interviews, I always have a space for questions, and I have like a very wide transparency policy. I don't believe questions are not to be asked. I mean, it can be whatever it is, from what is the salary bracket that I will tell them gladly, to what do you do in your socials with your team, or what will happen if I fail my onboarding, right? There is no limits unless it's legally binding, these kind of things that you always have to think as a leader. And I made that clear as well, that you can ask whatever. And usually conversations goes by the social aspect of it. I like to put like a couple of minutes to ask them, like, how has been your day? Or because in the past, right, if you think about office recruitment, you can always start the interview like, how was your commute here in London, right? And people say, oh yeah, the central line today was like, oh my God. In the remote, it's like, how has been your day? Or, you know, how was like the weekend? So you give a bit of space as well, because recruiting is a very stressful process for candidates, and there is no reason to make it more. So giving that easiness, create that safe space where they can share as much as they like. And I will maybe share back when they are like, how was it? Like, oh, it was great. I went to shopping with my husband, and then I came back and I'm just doing this now, right? So that gives a sense of comfort. It gives a sense of safeness that I think is very good, and influence a lot the perception that the candidates can get of the company and the culture from the very start. So even if they don't get hired or decide to move on in other things, I like to present the things as they are. And this is actually something that we do internally. We talk a lot about ourselves, and we talk about what we do, and we aim to create the safest space we can at any given moment.
Yeah, you've kind of segued me perfectly into kind of the next thing that I wanted to ask you about, just because I was, with a company like her, with such a strong ethos, and such a lovely ethos as well, I should add, that it's essentially just, the point is to make people feel super safe, and it's a super friendly kind of environment, and I think that is something that, just what you touched on there, of making people feel safe kind of instantly as soon as you can within that interview environment, is kind of an interviewing skill that's overlooked, probably, because it's probably like not really at the front of a lot of people's minds to make the candidate feel massively comfortable, because you just kind of assume that they're not going to be comfortable. It's an interview, right? But it's actually, if you can actually make them feel a little more comfortable, it's actually really valuable for what you're going to get out of them in that interview as well. I know it sounds kind of obvious, but it's definitely not talked about enough, I don't think. So what I was going to ask you there was how, again, her has such strong values, like how do you kind of how do you communicate those to the candidate in an interview?
Yeah, I walk through them. I just make it plain. So we have our core values, right? That they are like, and excuse my language, but one of ours is like, gets it done. And it does not mean that we are gonna do things wrong. It means that as a smallish startup, we need to be strategical and effective in doing things, you know, and there's times where you're gonna have to roll your sleeves and do things. I do this as much as I can, as when it's needed, right? So I talk to them about it. I explain, gets it done. I explain our value better together. We believe in collaboration. We are a fully distributed company, and that has its own challenges itself, like asynchronity, like time zones. So for example, my whole team is in the States and Latin America. So I work these central hours, right? So we need to be really effective in being better together. And it's not just mean about the collaboration, but as well, the small acts of kindness of like having a coffee over Zoom and talk about things that they are not work, to learn about your colleagues. So by collaborating, by talking, by communicating, getting everyone better. And the third one is Sorry, sorry. It's
That's okay.
like sorry. It was like I was like in my mind. Get it done, better together, and be real. I was like looking for the word. They came in Spanish.
That's
Ser
all right.
mejor.
I would not have
But,
understood, but you could have said it in Spanish. That's all right.
so be real, right? So and the be real is what I think, in my opinion, is probably one of a stronger value, because being real, it goes around a lot of things. So from being yourself, and probably today I'm wearing like a t-shirt, blue t-shirt with a unicorn on it, right? That under says, it's not a unicorn actually, it's a horse with an ice cream on their forehead. And under says like, you can be whatever you want, right? Silly t-shirts is one of my ways of be. I love them. I love them. I have a lot of them. And sometimes in the office, in the company culture, like the professional culture, this is frowned upon. I found this in some degrees, even in great companies. But for example, this is one of my ways of being real. I'm a very serious person when I need to be, but in my day-to-day, I'm towards the more funny and silly things. I like to joke. I'm very positive. I'm sometimes extremely optimistic, right? So being real is presenting yourself as you want. In my case, it's like my funny t-shirts. When it's summer, my tank tops with as well with printed funny jokes. Being open, talking with people, finding those times to connect, and so on, and presenting myself as well as I like, right? But also it's about being real with each other when the things are maybe not looking as good. So being able to come and give feedback in a way that is accepted, is consensual, and is constructive, even if the feedback is not good, right? So be real encompass all these things that when you combine them with better together and gets it done, create a synergy of, I hate that word, so corporate, but I cannot think about it. Create a synergy of a chain effect, right? Because you are trying to do really effective things, trying to innovate, trying to push forward to achieve those mission of love. And then you want to be with your team and be the best team member. And then you want to be yourself. You don't need to hide it. Literally, you don't need to hide it. I dyed my hair blue and I didn't tell anyone. I came up to the all hands and everyone were like, wow, amazing, celebrating. That is great, because it was something I wanted to do forever. I never done it because my professional life. And people in the company do this. So being real. So this is explained through the interviewing process and as a part of the intro, because I like to center the interviews around values, especially the ones I do, as I do not do the technical ones in depth. Mine are around values. I have a lot of care to who I hire, because I need and I want people that they are aligned with the value of, like, we are inclusive place. We are a place where we are not judging people, that where mistakes are recognized, owned, and try to avoid it in the future, where we give feedback every week to everyone you talk with. You're gonna get feedback very respectfully, constructive, good, bad, celebrations, right? So that's a way of as well to give a clear image, pointed with the pronouns usage, putting a bit of the social, humanize that scary conversation of an interview. Everyone goes to an interview and you never know what to expect. And then it gets exacerbated when the interviewer is not a engineering manager or a senior engineer. You are sitting with the head of or the CEO or the COO, right? It's like in the collective imaginarium is the people at the top, and they are like the decision makers, and they are like, boom, great, right? And then suddenly you are interviewing for like a mid-developer position with 3 years of experience, and in your mind, you create those stories, and those stories only can be disarmed by sharing, by opening vulnerability, by creating a safe space.
I absolutely love that. The simple yet really complex point of just humanizing the interview process and just kind of making yourself come across as more approachable in an interview. And yeah, it's just such a valuable thing to be able to do, isn't it? How do you tell, like, if someone's going to be a decent cultural fit or not?
It's a it's a very tricky process, right? Because it's a lot how they share, what they tell you. Obviously, the value alignment is very important as well with the skills, right? With the value alignment, what I do is like being like professional and appropriate for an interview, discussing the thing we do, asking opinions, and sometimes I like, if you don't mind to share with me, what do you think about this? What do you think about, I don't know, what are your views on dating or and in casual dating? Or I try to work through that, and then part of when you flip it over and to do it like, and this is no secret that I do this. So when you start to go over like, oh, tell me your experience, tell me, give me an example, how you work, what do you do in your day-to-day during the pandemic time when you were fully remote to keep the connection with people, or tell me about how you like to give feedback and how you like to receive feedback. What do you think is the best useful feedback, right? So from there, I use extract, like I can compose that image about the person I'm talking with. Is not a perfect science. I think no one is a perfect value alignment, not even myself. But I think it hints, right? There is always risk. There is always, people, I try to not be cynical, and I believe that I assume good intentions from everyone, right? I assume that someone in the interview is not gonna make up a response only because they want to work with us. And then it's a very much like this sense. I think like working and living in this kind of culture we try to foster also attune you to detect or identify the traits that you think they will be a great addition, because that's the thing about culture. Maintaining, we probably would not talk about it, right? But culture is a living thing. It changes organically, unorganically. You can influence, you can direct it, but you cannot say, this is the culture and I want this to be forever. That's not going to happen, especially when you have people bring their own ideas, their own opinions, their own worldviews, their own beliefs. They bring a lot on the table. So at the end of the day, is during interviewing, having these discussions open and not hide these facts. I don't, that's why I'm talking about them, right? And trying to compose that picture of the person you are seeing, like the professional and how their values, what they consider is important, why they want to work at her. For example, it's a very good question. People is like, oh, I love it. I follow the app for years. I use the app. Some of them, they sometimes share. I'm like, okay, great. That's a great start, right? So it's a bit of like intuition with data and just practice.
Yeah, no, I love that as well. I love that kind of concept of not kind of boxing off your culture like that, and almost encouraging thinking outside the box when it comes to culture, and encouraging different kinds of people to come in and share their ideas and encourage that is really important. In terms of, obviously, I know you said that the team's grown a lot. How, so let's say like you've interviewed, you've got the team, you've kind of, for lack of a better word, judged kind of whether they're a good cultural fit, and they've got all the necessary hard skills as well to get them into that role. So now you've got a really flourishing team. That team is constantly getting bigger. How do you maintain, I know we just touched on it slightly there, how do you maintain that healthy culture whilst also letting people have that kind of independence within their role too?
It's a very good question, right? I think maintaining culture is like trading water. You, as I said, you can box it, you can try to, but culture is gonna evolve. The thing that is more important is how you stop the bad influence on culture, right? How you prevent. But talking about that, we can pin on that. So how we maintain, I believe as well as culture is something, as I said, alive. Everyone is part of it. So the way to keep let's talk about like mainstream culture at her, right? Is all these things I've been describing. So that mainstream, that stream has like a direction. It has evolving in time, change, experiment with it, right? But I think that when you are a senior leader in an organization and you are committed with like the mission, the values, and the culture, the only way that you can really help to maintain it is living that culture truthfully and just displaying how you expect, how you want, not expect will be a very harsh word, how you want everyone to maintain this culture. How I message people, I ask them questions about how they're doing. I outside like the work things during work hours, like, hey, how was the other day? You went to this appointment, you told me, or you mentioned that you were doing this, how that went, or I saw these things you've been doing and it's great. So the thing is, the only way to maintain culture is, first of all, living it by living it with the rest of the company. At the end of the day, you cannot be sitting in your ivory tower of like high level, like senior manager and say like, oh yeah, all of you be better together, but my calendar is full. Don't call me for council. Don't call me for the Friday fields, or don't, it's like you have to be aware of your time and how you allocate, but you need to make the space to do that. And that has the effect, right? When you are surrounded by people that they are very alike in their ways of thinking of culture, that instills the example. Because like it or not, when you are like a manager and you are supporting people, you instantly became an example. So your good behaviors will be appreciated, and your bad behaviors will be replicated if you have them. So it's important to do that, right? And then is that living that, being an example, trying the best, and talking about it as well. Talking about, hey, I noticed that we haven't done this for a couple of weeks. What is that? Why we are not doing this? We were doing this. What changed? What happened? Being inquisitive, being a bit like always nurturing that conversations.
Yeah, I love that kind of lead by example kind of etiquette that you said there, like, and bad habits get replicated. Like, that's again something that I think is not really thought about too much, like specifically, like as a leader, like leading by example is a given, I suppose, but then those kind of those sort of bad traits, or I mean, no one's perfect, but if you kind of let them just sort of stream, especially in front of your team or around your team, it will 100% make an impact on it, and it's really important. And I love kind of your approach to it as well. I know that obviously it's within a community and within a product that you genuinely feel passionate about, so it's almost like it's going to be kind of, it sounds like it's coming really easily to you, for lack of a better phrase, to really live that culture and breathe that culture, which is really inspiring. So let's let's move out of the kind of queer dating app space and go a little bit more generic. What can other companies kind of do? What can they learn from the way that Her is kind of either structured or just generally operating? Because for me, I feel like the way that you're talking it's so inclusive, and I know that that's in part because it is a product within the LGBTQ plus community, but I feel like the way that you're carrying your culture and the kind of freedom almost that it sounds like you guys all have over there to be able to, just be yourselves fully. Like, what can other companies learn from that approach?
It is a very hard question. Start there, right? We, as you said, we are part of the LGBT community. We are LGBTQ product for LGBTQ people. So that gives us a very advantageous position to do things slightly different. I think that if someone can learn something about us, I think one of the very strong processes we have that I think that they are like key in nurturing this culture is our feedback loops at Her. So feedback loops is something that everyone talks about feedback in the industry. I mean, you have feedback everywhere. I mean, as an engineer, for everyone that is not a software developer or working at an engineering team that they are hearing today. So as an engineer, you get feedback. You get a lot of feedback, specifically technical feedback about your code from your peers, from your manager, from people like, oh, I saw your pull request. That is this code that you open right when you finish the work. It's like, hey, this is my code. Can someone take a look and make comments? And people go and say like, oh, that you did there is actually not the best way because blah, blah, blah. So you get this feedback, right? And companies they try to have like strong feedback loops, but I found the way like her and Robin spearhead the feedback loops is really useful in the way that you, as part of the her team, any her team member is getting regular feedback from a lot of people. As I said, consensuated. We have our user manuals where we specify how we like to receive feedback, what is the format, and how to do it, and we coach people as well to, like, when you give feedback, do it this way, right? But we have this format. It's like, I like, so you got your feedback, what you like, in an I wish. That frames the feedback really instantly, right? And it starts a conversation. The like is just an appreciation. It's just like, hey, great job. I give the other day a shout out. We have a shout out channel for like things, right? I have a team member that is very good at giving like detailed answers with like a lot of documentation and resources. He's very, very good at it. And every time someone has a question, he's available and answer. I'm always amazed because he's had so much knowledge. He's so good there, right? And I give that, so that part will be part of my one-on-one, where in the one-on-ones I save a space for it. I will be telling them like, hey, well done. I like really much that you give this answer and you put these links and then you frame the response in the boundaries of what is needed and really streamline, right? And then you have the I wish. The I wish is a bit it's a bit more abstract because it does not mean necessarily that is negative feedback, because we don't want to do the sandwich thing, right? That you put a good feedback and then you put a bad feedback and you finish with a good feedback. I think that's the worst way of giving feedback, because it's like, hold on, you are telling me good things, but in between those two things, you are putting really critical feedback, very bad one, like it's constructive or destructive, right? So the I wish is a way of opening the conversation, and that has to come as well, especially if it's negative or not as constructive, not as positive as you would like to give, because it's really easy to tell people how well they do their job. It's very, very hard to tell someone like, I saw the other day you, and this never happened. This is an example I made it up just for the record, like telling someone like, I saw you the other day that you keep misgendering Jane and referring her as him. You know, imagine that feedback. Imagine sitting someone and telling them like, in essence, like, you are being very rude. You are being very, you know, I don't know which words to use that will not are not like very, very non-PG, right? But that's feedback, or feedback around performance, or feedback about the jobs that they then made done. So the thing is like the conversation about it. It's like how you enable I wish that these tasks that should have been done by Friday were delivered by Friday and not by Wednesday, because this action caused me and someone else have to move the roadmap and we have to do this. And my question is like, what is stop you from that? How I can support you to this? Is there anything I can do to help you? Because I have ideas. If you want it, I will give it to you. So that feedback loop that is honest, but is supportive, because it's very unfair to tell someone like, oh, I wish that you finish the work on Friday. You know, I have to work Saturday morning. You know, that does not help. Do you think that the person not delivering on Friday, they don't know? They're going to be feeling very, very bad. And then if you come and it's like, you just, boom, salt on the wound, right? So it's flipping the, I don't like this with the, I wish this happened, how we make it better next time, or how I can support you on this topic. And I think it's very crucial, to be honest. It helps me a lot. It helps me personally to grow a lot during this year and a half, with all the feedback by my team, Robin, everyone is giving me, and people that I've been giving feedback for the same thing, that comment you did, and these ideas we put together, and these action plans we enabled and activated, they were working. They led to an improvement, you know, in whatever dimension we are talking about.
Yeah, I really love that. And I think that's probably the first time it's ever really crossed my mind. It's the first time I've ever thought about that. I love when you brought up about the criticism feedback, of kind of sandwiching it in between two good things. Like, that is kind of what you're taught, isn't it? Especially professionally, once you enter the professional world. It's how your teachers feedback to you at school. It's how kind of, it's how
It-
you're taught to feedback to team members and things. But you are right. I think it's pretty indirect.
yeah,
And it's not very proficient, really, I would say. Like,
it has like it has a name. That has a name. That practice of feedback is called I'm gonna use not a bad word, but it's the poo sandwich.
yeah.
I put you 2 slices of bread and I put a portion of poo in the middle, right? With the hope that you take the good parts and we skip over the middle one, because it's hard. It's really hard to being on top of all the things people does or that affect negatively, and then tell them, because if it's work related, like a missing deadline, that can be rooted in a lot of things, right? But what do you do when it's behavioral? What do you do when it's someone that actually developed or pick up a behavior that you as their manager, as their coach, don't find acceptable because it does not align with first, like, for example, if it's about behavior, whatever it is, right? From being rude to being loud at the office for no reason. I can think a million things, right? So how you face that? Because you are not talking about something you can teach as a hard skill. It's very important to be supportive of it and try to understand as well the problem of it. That I think is that I wish it, because it flips the perspective. It's not like, hey, you are doing this wrong, and it's wrong because I say so. It's like, hey, I wish that you have not done that because this has this effect on me or have this effect on people. And I'm here to tell you and see how we can change it, because this is the effect of your actions or your work or your words are having in me. And then you put that, right? And then it can be a discussion. It can be perfectly a misunderstanding. Sometimes it's like, oh, sorry, someone said, oh, I said this, but actually this is the thing, and this is what I was thinking, and you go through that conversation. That is a grow conversation for the good of the bad, because no one is perfect and no one gives feedback like accurate all the time. You can get things wrong, and that's fine. But the important thing is talking about it, to break those stories as well, because it's the stories in your head, right? If someone said something that you understand, the story in your head is like, oh, this person is saying this, what else they are saying, or what did they say? That you keep that story in your head, and those stories goes and goes and goes and goes until you put them in the open with the other person, and you close the gap to see what part of the story is actually true, what was like your mind just spiraling with, like humans do, right? I think that's the key of it, like the framing of it, the way of the regularity of it, being used to it, not being feeling ambushed by feedback, not feeling vulnerable or in a disadvantaged position because a manager is giving you feedback, right?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. But the kind of the approach to just it's such a simple flip to kind of give someone essentially, well, whether it's negative feedback or something a little bit sterner, let's say, just saying like, I wish, like that is literally such a simple thing to do, but you're essentially opening the door to such a much more mature conversation, and it's going to be a conversation. It's not just going to be a manager making someone feel like crap and then kind of moving along with the rest of their day. Like you're gonna, you're showing that person at the same time, just by doing that you actually value what is going on with them, and then you want to figure out a solution instead of just bringing it to their attention and then moving on and hoping that they kind of get the picture. Like you actually want to find out. And then also, like, if you're saying like, I wish, because like you said, it's letting them know that like it's affected you, then you're putting the responsibility on them to change it without just saying change it. Like, it's like, if you really care, like if you really want this team to work, if you want to, be productive for the company, like you would change this because it's affecting those around you. Like, it's not just about you misbehaving, it's everybody else's kind of priority to work. And it's such an intelligent thing. So that kind of nicely segues me into my kind of penultimate question. In terms of the wider spectrum of tech, it's such a huge industry, so this might be a little of a vague question, but whose responsibility is it? I know obviously you're very obviously doing a really great job as a leader at Her to really drive inclusivity, and Her generally as a brand sounds like it's really kind of pioneering inclusivity within tech. What can other tech companies be doing, and whose responsibility is it in terms of, let's say, like the devs on the team specifically, or managers, or CTOs, or CEOs, or founders from the get-go? Whose kind of responsibility is it, would you say, to kind of keep the ball rolling with inclusivity within tech?
I believe that everyone is in some degree responsible, but in this specific question, the burden falls into the leadership, the leadership of companies. And this is because, I mean, the devs as well, they have a big responsibility. You cannot, is the problem of this, right? You cannot leverage inclusivity if you are focusing on a small segment of people doing it and then just getting the rest not doing it. So everyone is responsible. So how is, the question is like, what is the level of responsibility of those people, right? As someone in a managerial position, right, in a leadership position, I have a responsibility to make sure that I promote inclusion and diversity and equity, right? To be fair, to create opportunities, but also the devs, content, marketing, growth, whatever it is, they have the responsibility as well, because I can be all the inclusive I want, or I can be all inclusive I can be, but if that does not trickle down, or the company, and not trickle down actually, that the company is not supporting that inclusivity from the rest of the verticals in the business, inclusivity will fail, because you will increase inclusivity in the hiring pipeline. You will have more women, more people of color, more neurodivergent persons coming through, and then they will find that actually the environment is not good for them because the rest of the team is not inclusive. So it's important that this responsibility falls through all of us, in different measures, in different aspects. But at the end of the day, if you, for example, have hired someone that is neurodivergent, they're in the spectrum, right? You do the interview process, you will adjust the interview process for them, obviously. And if you are not doing that, you can get that learning. Just ask the people if they want to disclose, and make sure you do things right. But then you have to make sure that you cannot go to the team and announce to people that, hey, we hired someone neurodivergent. It's like, let's make our best. But the team needs to care enough to get to know this person, to be able to be inclusive with them, that do not treat the difference and the diversity as something that has to be slot in a place that it does not fit. It's more of creating the space for them to fit in as they want, within obviously their professional role, but as a person. And it's again back to humanizing everything. Companies are companies. I do this a lot. Companies need to make money because everyone needs to be paid. We do this. I mean, we charge our product so we can keep doing it, so we can do new things, we can hire new people, we can create employment, we can support the community. But that dehumanizes a lot when you talk about business. So the inclusive approach, I think, is a mere question of humanity. The responsibility I have with inclusion, it will be higher, and it has to be measured with a higher standard, probably, in terms of because I'm in the front door telling people yes or no, that you enter, you don't, right? But the team has the responsibility as well, with myself there as being an example of making sure that inclusion is actually enabled and is supported. That is not, oh, let's hire people of color because we don't have people of color. And I saw that happen. And then the people of color felt isolated because there is no community, there is no support. People, majority of white people in a company were like, well, I mean, it went from questioning their abilities, their technical abilities, to plainly not talking with them, and then feeling incredibly isolated. And that's why that connection between the inclusion you want to achieve as a leader and the team being on board with it, it was not happening. They were like, we don't know what to do. You look different. You talk different. You work differently. It's just like we don't know. So there is a lot of nuances. But at the end of the day, it's everyone. It's just making sure that it's aligned and it's consistent. So from the day-to-day to the more high-level process, it needs to be a consistent approach, owning the different parts by the right people.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an element of kind of educating yourself, isn't it? Because you kind of need, even if you don't feel like you have a certain amount of community, like you were just saying there, and you hire someone who doesn't look like someone who, well, that's the rest of the company, for example, they aren't going to get that sense of community whatsoever. And if it's not already there, it's up to you to educate yourself to kind of just create it, even without members of certain communities or etc. It's up to you to educate yourself. And create that within your existing team, so that when someone does come in, it's not going to be just a case that you're not going to retain them at the end of the day. Like, isn't it? Yeah.
And in the topic of responsibility, right? Very briefly, it's like the responsibility of fixing the inclusion is on the leads, it's on the leaders of the company. My partner, my husband, is Vietnamese, so I've seen this in action. I've seen a very like how he felt like in the UK, for example, in several companies he worked for in marketing, he didn't feel represented in the company because it was like one Asian person and the rest of the team, they were like British or European, and where people were like welcoming and nice. It was nothing nasty, but it was at times he was like, oh, they were asking me about this, and they made an assumption because I'm Asian and they expect that I was, you know, from a certain country where I'm not. And they, instead of asking, you know, the assumption is like, because the inclusion problems runs actually not in the big thing. It's very rare to see hostility or plain racism, but is the microaggressions, right? And it's like the responsibility of the leader is identifying those, knowing where they can happen, and educate, as you mentioned. That's a very good point. Like, educate everyone, yourself included, and you're first. So you do the work, you walk the walk, you know, and then you go to the team. It's like, oh, we are gonna talk about this, and it's not need to be like, oh, read this book about being inclusive and don't do microaggressions. But it's like, we are gonna learn about these things and we are gonna talk about this topic. What do you think about this? Right? There is a way of educating that does not feel unorganic, and this is like all these things. It's a lot we can talk. We can talk about hours about this topic. Sorry.
No, it's fine, and I'd love to do that, to be honest. I think the bringing up there's those, especially the micro, almost kind of that you would think that there's a defense almost, isn't there, of like, oh well, it was an accident, and you know, you don't kind of think that it's going to affect them, or and it's just like you said, assumptions that people probably don't even realize that they're making. If it's brought up to you, then you have to change that. There is no defending that by being like, oh, I'm sorry, it was just an accident, like I won't assume. Now I know, sort of thing, like there's no brushing it off, like you have to change that about yourself. And then other people will follow suit as well.
Exactly.
It's definitely a full episode in its own, so I'd love to get you back on and see how her's doing and down the line. So I've just got one more question for you, Victor, and that is, what advice would you have for someone who's looking to be in a similar position to you?
I think the advice I have is be as human as possible. Don't be afraid of saying like, I don't know this, or today I'm not gonna work because I'm not feeling great. I think like if you want to be an effective leader, you need to be overall a human. You need to be approachable, and you need to be sincere with yourself and with everyone around yourself. And for that, you need to take the steps of taking care of yourself. My views on leadership, as I mentioned, they are not like, oh, I'm telling people what to do, because that's nonsense. I hire really intelligent people, really skilled people with a lot of experience to do something I cannot, right? Why I will be telling them, oh, do this now, do this, that, right? That's not the point of leadership. The point of leadership is bridging the gaps between like how the people executing over the plan, how they can learn about the wider things, right? Telling the story, where the strategy is going. What are your ideas as a leader? Like, oh, I want to do this by the end of the year, or I want to change this technology that I identify is not working very well for us, right? It's gapping those parts, but for that, you are going to be a support. You are going to be a pillar. You have to think yourself as a pillar a supporter, not a tyrant. I mean, you can be a tyrant sometimes. Everyone falls for it. It's not the end of the world. It's just like being a tyrant does not work, as we know. Okay, but sometimes you will have to say and make the hard decision of like, I cannot let them to find this solution or go with this because many reasons say like, oh, we are gonna be doing this. But there is a difference between being falling for the tyrant and saying like, oh no, we are doing this because I say so, as being human and explain the things, right? Being human, tell them like, look, we have to do this, and these are the reasons. At the end of the day, being human, take care of your teams, take care of forming those relationships that will enable you as a person and as a leader to be successful, and be honest and take care of yourself. This is a hard job. Everyone wants to be like the boss. Everyone wants to be, and it's admirable, and it's really, I will encourage everyone to pursue it and work towards their goal, right? What we usually miss when we are like in our like early years, and I realized this a couple of years back, is like, actually you have a story in your head, right? That the CTO is not in the office every day and he's in a talk and he's doing this, but it's a toll on it. It's a different toll. It's not like a less work, it's actually probably more work, but it's extremely rewarding. I mean, as it was like building stuff technically, but the difference is like with people you form as well like a stronger bond that it done well. You are getting friends, you are getting connections, and you know, it's rewarding in a very personal level as well. So
what amazing advice, especially the humanizing yourself. And there is a difference, you're right, between just being a tyrant and you know, just being able to utilize your authority to make a good decision. I think that's just perfect advice. So Victor, I've genuinely really like, I know I said at the beginning I was really excited to learn about this subject and to talk with someone with such good experience and such involvement in the community as well. I know you're speaking at Pride Tech next month as well, so I'm definitely going to be trying to get down to that, and yeah, there's definitely more 100% more focus on the LGBTQ and diversity.
yes,
inclusion within tech, and it's really exciting where things are going, I think, and people like yourself are obviously kind of spearheading that kind of thing, so it's really good to see. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been lovely.
thank you very much for having me, and I hope I see you at Pride in Tech.
Yeah, that'd be wicked. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can hover over the logo in the corner and hit subscribe. Follow us on all the socials, they're all there down in the comments. Head to our website amicusjobs.com for all the roles and all the other podcast episodes too. They're all out there. There's some really cool ones that we've done so far on kind of being a woman in tech, and some diversity ones as well. So if you're interested in this episode, then it's likely you might be interested in those as well. So I'll drop a link down to them too. Victor, thank you again so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.